Welcome back to MouthpieceSports.com's Buzz Session, along with Coach Ann Eastman-Kuzella, Liz Tortorella Nelson, and Megan Radler. Thank you very much, ladies. We were just starting to get heated up there when we took a break, so let's continue on that point before we move on to our next one. We seem to establish that individual instruction has some value and that it does apply to team sports, but I don't think we entirely agree on how many people have opportunities to it and what athletes we're actually targeting. So if we could continue with that, Liz, you mentioned how you do see the benefits in it, but not everybody maybe has the same opportunities as some of the student athletes, say, at the Latin School.
Well,
you can be diplomatic as possible. Sure.
Well, at the Latin School, and what I see is that we have a lot of great athletes, and they'll play. Our goal is to have our best athletes at the school play as many sports as possible. We offer a lot of sports at our school, and about upper of 80% of our students play a sport, and that's pretty good.
That's terrific.
So that's a positive thing in our mind. But what happens is you may have that elite athlete who chooses to specialize in a sport, and we encourage that at every avenue. We encourage it, but we also have our kids have a lot of opportunities. They've got opportunities to play a lot of different sports, plus outside activities. We don't even talk about the extracurricular that these student athletes are involved with besides their sport. So they're getting pulled in different directions. And our goal as a coach is, I always find our coaches being more committed than our student athletes. And so I know I'm kind of turning the tables here a little bit or twisting it, but my issue, at least now with these kids, is that they're less committed to one sport, more committed to everything else in their life. So it's kind of watered down a little bit.
Coach Radler, we'll get into the multi-sport athlete in a minute, but student athletes at the Latin School and at St. Ignatius obviously have more opportunities than some other students, say at public league schools or so forth. And I think there is a dichotomy there of that opportunity versus athletic ability. Would you agree that perhaps these students have more opportunities than, say, the majority of the other student athletes that comprise the Chicago area?
It's a funny question that you've asked me, because I don't feel like I'm qualified to say whether or not a family that's sending a kid through St. Ignatius has more options with which they may or may not have, whereas someone in the public schools. But again, because of the media outlets and because of everything, there is more exposure for these kids. And yes, families can get their kids in club programs, but good athletes are going to go and have opportunities kind of no matter where they go.
Okay, well then on to our next topic, Coach. High school sports, club sports, individualized training. We've mapped out a pretty comprehensive program for young women and young men that span the entire season. I think it makes it pretty difficult to play volleyball, basketball, and softball and be elite in one sport. Has the multi-sport athlete kind of gone the way of the dinosaur?
I think it really depends on what you want out of your sport. So I think it's going to be in your family dynamics, what you guys are looking for and what that individual athlete is looking for and how far they want to go in that sport. I think it's very few the number of athletes that can multi-sport it and play at that next level. I just don't see it that much anymore. I think there's a handful of those, so I think when you eventually specialize, am I recommending that you specialize? No. I think you should play all your sports to the best of your ability, however long you want to play, whether it be all through high school. If you can letter in 3 sports all through high school, I think that's wonderful. But I also think that if your goal is to be a future Kobe Bryant or whoever, let's say, you're going to have to specialize. You're going to eventually have to narrow it down and put more time in, unless you are that rare person who has it. I think there's very few people that have it, and there's a lot of people who have to work at it to get it. And there's nothing wrong with either way. But you definitely, eventually, in my opinion, you would have to choose. You'd have to choose.
Coach, by focusing on one sport, are we limiting our opportunities for these young women?
I don't think so. I mean, you're talking to somebody that grew up, and I played a lot of different sports until I got to probably 7th grade, and then somebody out of the blue said, hey, you can be pretty good at volleyball. So I just took it from there, started playing club, and it opened the doors up tremendously for me. So if somebody was going to approach me and talk to me about specializing, I have a great experience with it. So I'm very pro, but also not everyone could specialize, nor do I think club is the way to go for everyone. There's something to be said for club programs who have opened the doors up to let it be more of a social program or a rec league. There's club directors that just open the doors up to anybody, that it's not a privilege anymore to make these teams, that they're accepting a check from these families, but they probably have no business being on an elite program, a traveling team, but they're accepting this money and they're training their kids, and probably not to the best of their ability. So I'm kind of in limbo there. I loved club sports growing up. I had a great opportunity, and it's not for everyone, but I think you really need to research where you're going to go and what you're going to do and what your family's going to get involved with.
Coach Redler, the opportunities for women, whether it be club sports or specifically scholastic, kind of the traditional high school sports, they are increasing all the time, though, and I would think all of this is part of the reason for that.
Oh, sure. I feel like that women now in sports have the most opportunities we've ever had. I mean, I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, had Division I scholarships, but decided that athletics were a means to an end for me. My heroes growing up were Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and I didn't have the WNBA, and I didn't have Jenny Finch to look up to. I knew that eventually I wasn't going to end up in pro sports. So I chose athletics to be a stomping ground for me to learn how to deal with life. I feel like that's the platform that I come with a lot now when working with my kids. I might have kids that end up in Division I programs, maybe go play for the Chicago Bandits or go play somewhere else, but majority of my kids are going to learn life lessons, and if they can get them from each sport and play throughout the year and enjoy themselves, then they should.
Coach Eastman Kuzella, we talk about these opportunities for women and how many more there are today, but with that comes all kinds of added pressure and all kinds of added scrutiny. We wouldn't be here today if there wasn't an advent in the media such as the internet. Mouthpiece.com obviously is an internet-based sports vehicle. Are we asking these young women to grow up too soon and throwing them feet to the fire because this is relatively new development in the game?
Well, in my personal experience, I think it actually worked out that I didn't play as much as the athletes who play today. I think kids actually play too much. I think the club season is too long, in my opinion. It's way too long. I think kids are burning out or peaking too soon. And I mean, I was cut 2 years in high school, so I missed out on 6 months of volleyball, and then so for me to further my career, it ended up that maybe I loved it a lot longer than maybe I would have if I would have actually made my high school team. So I did eventually go on to make that team and further my career, but I think today's athlete is just, they train all the time. There's no break for them. There's no being a kid. I mean, I remember doing lots of fun things as a kid. I don't know that kids do that these days. It's from one sport to the next sport, or it's that one sport. For volleyball, it's almost 10 to 11 months out of the year. Well, I mean, there's no break.
I think that nowadays we are seeing a lot more athletes that are getting burned out. They might be phenomenal athletes, but if, like any athlete knows, if your heart's not in it, why play the game?
Certainly.
And I think, I see that a lot more now than I ever did.
Our 25-year-old #1 world-ranked tennis player just retired she retired at 25 years old. So, and that's great. She's amazing to watch. If you follow tennis and when you look at her age, right?
About, yeah.
If you look at her age and then you look at professional basketball players who maybe last a little bit longer, baseball, definitely, some football try. It's pretty young, 25.
A couple $100 million will make you stick it out a little longer, won't it?
It's true.
I don't know.
Depends on who you talk to.
Yeah.
Well, those opportunities aren't there yet for women, at least not in the traditional sports, maybe in golf and tennis, but they are there perhaps down the road, and we will delve into that when we return on MouthpieceSports.com's Buzz Session.